Hey, what's up guys? It's Hazard. Today we're going to talk about what it's like to fly an F-16 across the Atlantic.
I'll take a top off if you got it, buddy.
All right, so let's talk about how we got there. So story time. So we've been in Afghanistan for 7 months. We're getting ready to go home. We have 2 sick ships. So the first sick ship has already left. We're the second one. So we take off. KC-135 Blast takes off down the runway first, and then we follow it. We have travel pods on the jet, so we've taken down all the weapons. We have these converted napalm canisters on there, and so you can put all your stuff in there. But these travel pods, they limit you quite a bit. So I think it's 400 knots, 0.9 Mach. So 400 knots, that's pretty slow. So when you take off, number one is gonna be 350 knots. And then number two is gonna wanna be about 400 knots. So with a 6 ship taking off with 15-second spacing, that's going to be about 6 miles from front to back. So it took us like 150 miles for number 6 to be able to catch up. We refuel just to make sure everything's good to go. And then we fly towards Kandahar. Once we hit Kandahar, we flow down south into Pakistan along what's called the what is that called? The Boulevard, and then we see the ocean. So the ocean, you know, it's a sight for sore eyes after being in Afghanistan. So seeing the ocean with these dirty jets flying across it was a pretty cool sight to see. At that point, we cut across the Gulf of Oman, and then we passed Dubai. So Dubai, you know, with their artificial islands, we can see the Palm Island, which is pretty famous, and then they have a set of islands that they built to look like the world. So it's called the World Islands, which I'm sure cost a lot, but we flow past that into Al Udeid in Qatar. So Al Udeid is kind of the holding base for everything. Everything goes through it when we're either going to deploy or coming back. So huge base out there. And we're only supposed to be there for about a day or two, but we have another tanker that's meeting us back from the States. Now that tanker landed in Rota, Spain. So beautiful area on the coast of Spain, and for some reason it broke. So we find out that their windshield wiper broke. So I'm looking at you tanker guys for delaying us for 2 weeks. So for 2 weeks, every day we're showing up, you know, checking on the status of this tanker. Still broken. They're shipping that one windshield wiper all the way from the States to fix it. So Al Udeid is next to Doha. That's the major city. So we end up getting a pass to go into Doha, and we end up smoking cigars. You know, Doha, I thought it was going to be like Kabul in Afghanistan, so a little bit run down, but turns out extremely modern city. All the buildings are glass and steel. So we end up smoking cigars there, talking about you know, what it was like to be deployed, kind of decompressing from that, because it does take some time to decompress from being downrange, especially with how busy we were. Then 2 weeks later, we end up finally, tanker's fixed. We take off and we blast with that 6 ship again with 1 tanker, and we flow across Saudi Arabia. Now, Saudi Arabia doesn't want us to refuel in there, so we didn't do that. But once we got to Egypt, started refueling, and then way off in the distance, I could see the pyramids out there. Threw my targeting pod out there and could see them, you know, relatively up close. So I'm gonna check that off the box that I saw. So flew past the pyramids, then made it into the Mediterranean Sea, looking at the Greek islands, talking about, you know, what we're gonna be doing when we get back, because it does take a while. So it took about 11 hours for us to go from Qatar all the way to Spain. So you're there, you know, just trying to pass the time. You're trying to refuel, trying to check your fuels to make sure they're good to go, make sure your engine's good. And number 2, 4, 6, so those are the wingmen of the formation. Usually their job is to bring trivia or jokes or things like that while we make it, to make it a little bit easier to cross. We eventually land in Morón, Spain. We have a night there, so go get some Spanish wine, get some good food. And then the next day we have a big decision to make. So the swells out there in the middle of the Atlantic, because a storm is brewing, are 30 feet high. So higher than a house, 2-story house. And so we're like, all right, typically we're limited to 10-foot sea states, but this is an AOS movement, so there's no restrictions on that. It looks like the weather's gonna be socked in for the next 2 weeks. So we end up talking about the risk and end up going, because when you're in an F-16 single engine jet, if you have to punch out over the Atlantic with 30-foot swells, you're probably not going to make it. So we end up going. Fortunately, the engines, no issues with that. Same thing with the whole deployment, no engine issues, which is always a good sign, especially with these jets built back in the late 90s, early 2000s. So a great job by the maintainers. So we take off out of Morone, again, 6 ship, but we have 2 tankers this time. So first one is a KC-135. That brings us about a third of the way across the Atlantic. And then it turns back to Europe. And then that second tanker ends up taking us all the way across the Atlantic. So again, midway across the Atlantic, we end up encountering some weather. That means we have to close into a close formation. So we're having to refuel every 30 minutes or so. We want to stay topped off. Fuel is your friend. It gives you options. And so we're tucking in with the tanker. We're refueling, because if we spread out, we can use our radars to stay in formation, but it becomes cumbersome. It takes a long time to get the jets back together to refuel. So we're in close formation, 3-foot wingtip clearance. Think of it the last time we're in fog. So imagine just driving next to a car. You can only see the car out there. So that's what it was like for a couple hours. So really fatiguing. You're just trying to stay focused, because if you go lost wingman, you're going to be able to most likely get a radar lock, but it's gonna be a big pain, and you might end up running low on fuel. So we're in close formation for a couple hours. Once we break through the weather, so blue skies, great conditions, we're able to go out into more of a route formation. So that's 2 wingtip lengths all the way up to 500 feet, which is a lot more relaxing. Still no autopilot, so you're still hand flying it in formation, but just trying to stay focused. It's about 10 hours. We have to refuel about 10 times on the way to Shaw Air Force Base. Finally, we make it to the coast of North Carolina. At that point, we don't need the tanker anymore. We can fly a lot faster than it. So we push it up, start making our way towards Shaw, and we end up doing what's called a 6-ship initial. So usually when we're flying, we're doing a 2-ship or 4-ship, and we fly up initial. So initial over the airfield, 2,000 feet, and then do a spiraling descent to land. It's the most efficient way to get aircraft back. 6-ship was a little bit non-standard, so we ended up taking some heat for that. But I mean, it was a great feeling to be able to look down, see all your friends and family waiting there for you. A lot of them have been waiting there for 2+ weeks since we got stuck in the deed. Land, and then we're good to go. So we end up taking some time off, and then it's back to training again. So that's what it was like to fly across the Atlantic. It's really nothing special. We refuel all the time. When we were doing missions, we were refueling maybe 3 or 4 times each mission downrange. So it's just a little bit longer flight, about 10, 11 hours making it across, but definitely memorable coming back from a combat deployment. All right, before we close out, I want to thank Skillshare for sponsoring this video. So Skillshare is an online learning space. They're an online learning community. So they do a good job of having a diverse set of classes. So if you want to learn photography or videography, or how to make a website, or even more traditional classes like leadership and management, you can go on there. They do a good job of having new instructors cycle in to teach classes. I did a class on mental toughness, so you can check that out just by searching for Hazard. The first 1,000 people from this channel who sign up for the link in my description will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare Premium. So click on that, learn something, and I'll talk to you next time.